Well, hello again, it's Adam, and welcome back to Rare Classic Cars. Today, no, you're not watching a Quinn Martin production, or Kojak, or Hawaii 5.0, or Canon, or one of the number of shows that these cars appeared on in the 1970s. You're watching Rare Classic Cars in Automotive History. But this is my 1973 Ford Galaxie 500, the last year for the Galaxie. And it's a hardtop, a true hardtop, not the pillared hardtop. So you can see here there's no pillar, no B pillar. And it's a super, super rare automobile, and this one has just 7,400 miles on it. So they made about 26,000 of these Galaxie four-door hardtops, and of those, about 6,600 were equipped with the 400 cubic inch engine, which this has. Only about 250 were equipped with the automatic climate control, which this one has. 245 were painted black. That's it. Out of 26,000, 245 were painted black. And again, that's according to the Marty report. And of those 245, in total, just five were black with this blue vinyl interior. That's right, 5 were made in this exact color combination, interior and exterior. So super rare car. If you watch the police car shows of the 70s, these were always really pillared hardtops, as Ford used to call them. They had the B pillar. But this one I just absolutely love because, like I said, it is a hardtop. It's super rare. Does have the 400 under hood, which makes it a very enjoyable driving vehicle. And I got this car out of Southern Illinois probably 5 or 6 years ago. It was on Facebook Marketplace, you guessed it. My favorite place to find low mileage original vehicles. And it was a barn find. It was a true barn find. It was in a barn, all dusty, flat tires, and I bought it sight unseen. The seller sent me some photos of it, and you could just tell from the inside and the outside that it really was a low mileage car. And it came with documentation too from the first owner, selling it to the second owner, selling it to the third owner. And I thought it was just super cool. I mean, to me, these cars look just so masculine. These are not, as some of my designer friends like John Manugian would say, this is not a beautifully styled car. I mean, you look at the side and you don't see the sculpture, you don't see the beautiful wheel arches and fender flares and things like that. You have kind of this long drag section at the bottom, which was typical of Ford styling at the time, really a hallmark. You have these pretty slab-sided corners. You don't have a fender peak molding here, but you almost have a little bit of that reference, if you will, albeit less so than the Mercury's, where this ridge would curl up a little bit more, give you a little bit more of that Lincoln feel. But it definitely is a Ford in styling and looks, and to me it just looks extremely masculine, and one of those cars where you just expect somebody to come out of it who's a police officer from the 70s, smoking a cigarette, drinking a coffee. Obviously, that's not happening these days. But again, the Galaxies for this era were super rare, and this one has really just a few options. It has the 400 cubic inch V8, as I mentioned. It has the all vinyl interior, has the full wheel covers, which you can see. It has automatic climate control, which is pretty shocking. So it does have air conditioning and heat and all the automatic functionality associated with that. And it doesn't have a radio. There was no optional radio. You can see there's a plug there in the passenger side fender for where the antenna is supposed to be. That's a factory plug, and you'll see on the inside, on the radio plate, there's just kind of a little filigreed design because it's devoid of a radio, and that's how it came from the factory. And it does have the firm ride and handling package, which was a $22 option in 1973, which transforms this car from that mushy, oozy, I think wonderful in some cases, Ford ride, to something that's much more taut and firm. I would say on par with kind of the Chrysler standard rides of the era. So that gives you a sense of where Chrysler fits on the spectrum. Ford at the one end was very mushy for the standard suspensions. Chrysler for their standard suspensions was quite firm. And this one with the firm ride and handling package, I would say mirrors about the Chrysler ride. So it's pleasant, it's not obtrusive, but it's very different from your base Ford. So why don't we take the camera off, take a look around it, and talk a little bit more about the car. Okay, so let's do a walk around of the 73 Galaxie. First of all, you have this unique one-year only grille up front. And it changed in '73 because they had to meet a 5-mile-an-hour impact standard in the front, so you get kind of this big chunky bumper. This one does not have the optional package that had the bumper guards and the rub strip in it. It's just a standard bumper, but it is a bit chunky. And this Galaxie grille is different from the LTD, and even different down to this little, I don't know what you'd call that, ornamentation doodad, I guess. So if that were an LTD, it would say LTD there in red. And the grille texture is a bit different. You have kind of this egg crate grille, very Ford styling theme with this, I don't know what you want to call it, kind of coffin nosy hood. Is you got the Mercurys, they would pull that shoulder further out, and the Continentals almost increasingly further out to get the hoods of those cars. The Ford had kind of this narrowest section here, and then the Mercury was a little bit wider, the Continental was even wider. So it has that Ford theme, but like I said, you just pull that shoulder out and you get, I guess pulling that shoulder out denotes increasing price of the vehicle. And as mentioned, this is the last year for the Galaxie. It would be sunset. The LTD would kind of take over for all of the full-size vehicles for Ford. And this does have the optional all-vinyl interior where it's good and bad. The limiting factor in this car when you're driving it is not the suspension system, it's how well you can keep yourself planted in these super smooth, slippery seats. And on the Galaxie, you did get a different door panel from the LTD. Here you just have the little semi-padded armrest there. It is a full armrest, but it's only partially padded, interestingly. And you can see there's no radio, so there's the automatic climate control system. But there's just a blocked plate off where the radio would be, and the other blocked plate above the radio is where the clock would be. I do find it funny too, the Galaxies have this faux wood grain used more sparingly than the faux wood grain in the LTDs. You can see here, even on the glove box, the area above the glove box, that whole thing would be faux wood grain on the LTDs. Here, it's just a little bit smaller use and sparse use of the wood grain. This car did come with an interesting rear floor mat that's got the Ford GT40 on it. I think it was a dealer period piece back then. And kind of no frills other than that. I think this was owned by a Mennonite farmer who must not have understood that the automatic climate control uses electronics and was not ordered with a radio, no power options. Does have power steering, power brakes, power disc brakes too. So he wanted to go a little faster, I guess. And it has the 400, as I mentioned, V8 under hood. This, in '73, you can see this bumper is a little bit closer to the body than in '74 because they didn't have to meet the 5-mile-an-hour impact standard in the rear in '73. It was just 2.5-mile-an-hour impact standard. But this car just looks so menacing and looks absolutely like a police vehicle from the era, especially without the white walls. It did come when I bought this car with the original tires that amazingly held air, but they did not feel safe driving it. I promptly replaced them. Some people keep driving these cars on original tires, and I can't do that. I've had one blow out on me. Thankfully, it didn't cause any damage, but you can do a lot of damage. You can lose control, so I just replaced tires. Out back, we have this new theme. This was new for '73. '71 had the full light bar on the full-size Fords. '72 got rid of that, and then '73 was this new design that held over until '74. And again, no rub strip in this bumper, no bumper guards. And I love the fact that this car is a true hardtop, not the pillared hardtop. You put the windows down, even on a fall day like this, you just put the heat on, put the windows down, get some fresh air. Not much better. This car does have a wonderful key buzzer to it too. Everybody who was a child of the '70s will remember this noise. And there you have it. I'll turn that off so we don't annoy ourselves with that. And pretty plain Jane, like I said, no tilt wheel on here. The Galaxies didn't have the stainless trim around the pedals, and even though this does have the disc brakes, it kind of has the logo there for the disc brake, but it doesn't say disc brake on the brake pedal. And these do have a little bit different steering wheel too. This is a 2-spoker, no cruise. The cruise control, if you got that, had the buttons here and there. Let's take a look under hood. Beautiful door closing sound on these Fords. See if I can get this with one hand. By the way, be sure you oil your hood hinges on your Fords. Typical problem, people didn't oil them, they muscle the hood up and down, wears out the hinges, then the hood pops up at the corners. So always oil your hood hinges at least once a year on your Fords. So they said this is a 400 cubic inch, 2-barrel V8, wonderful carburetor. Still has the original radiator hose that's soft and pliable, so I haven't changed it. Does have air conditioning, still charged on R12. And these made about 170, 175 horsepower. It wasn't great in the horsepower department, but I'm telling you, you really don't miss any additional horsepower. You move away from a stoplight just fine. It's got great, I would say, acceleration. Just the torque is high on these. And the 400, I've driven these with the 351. The 400 is just so much better. So much better. It feels almost as torquey as the 429s and even the 460s, and it was. I think the torque rating of the 400 was about the same as the 429s. The horsepower was less by about 30-ish. And you've got the high-C juice can there for the climate control to power it. Great thing about these cars too is if you have a heater core issue, I bought so many of these, and of course the heater cores are pretty old now. It's right under that little access plate. You just take these two hoses off. There's about, I think, you got to get this vacuum tee off too to get some working room. But you might have to take 8 or 9 screws out, and then you got the access plate and you're ready to work. You access it from under hood. Pretty easy job. Especially if you have power tools to take out the screws. And you can just go zzz, zzz, zzz. I don't use power tools to put them back in though. I always start those threaded by hand and then, you know, maybe use power tools for part of the way, but I don't snug them up with power tools ever. It's just a tool to get you a little bit more speed. Let's start it up here. We'll do my famous reach in start. So smooth, so quiet. These 400s just have a great sound to them. They really do. This car just has a single exhaust on it from the factory. It's quiet, but makes great noises. Wonderful engine. The only downside to these is that some of them have weak bottom ends, particularly in the later years, and the 351Ms do as well. They tend to lose oil pressure at relatively low mileage. Here's the trunk, kind of unadorned, not well trimmed. Still has the original spare with the marking on it. Spare hubcap there that I found, or wheel cover. And there's the license plate that was on it when I bought it. You can see it was last tagged in 1995. And whomever Zella is, I have no idea, but hello Zella. Lots of the original paperwork in there too in that bag. So that's a walk around of this 73 LTD. Let's take it for a drive. I should have said Galaxie. 73 Galaxie. Let's take it for a drive. Well, here we are in the 73 Galaxie, carving up the country roads here on a beautiful fall day. And this car with the ride and handling package is actually not a mushy handler. It actually takes these curves pretty well, especially compared with its contemporaries and other Ford products of the era. It's almost kind of Chrysler-esque in terms of the ride. You know, for those who've driven the Chryslers of the era, you got the torsion bar front. There we go, a little bit of cornering. Torsion bar front, leaf spring rear. The limiting factor in this car is not the suspension as much as it is the slippery vinyl seat that you slide around in if you take a corner too hard. You gotta kind of keep yourself planted. But this car actually, I would say, corners really, really well. It's kind of fun actually driving up and down these roads. No tire squeal. I mean, I'm not taking these things extremely fast, but certainly in other Fords of the era, I think I would have been in the ditch. Other than that, the other thing that strikes me as unique about these is that the seating position is pretty low and the dash is pretty high here. So you kind of feel like you're sitting down in the car unless you really prop yourself up or kind of readjust yourself to have your back firmly and upright against the backrest, which is hard because with this slippery vinyl, every time you kind of go around a corner over a bump, you seem to sink downward and your butt scoots forward. So that's the way it is. And I would say the bench seats in these cars are not as comfortable as the GM cars of the era. Kind of a pretty flat bottom cushion. Here we go. The 400's got some good power. I mean, it's just a smogged motor, so it doesn't have a lot of horsepower, but it certainly has good torque. You're just trying to accelerate away from a stoplight, you have no issues at all in this car. And it's just a 2-barrel, but that 2-barrel is a wonderful 2-barrel, the Autolite or Motorcraft 2100. Very reliable. This car never gives me any trouble starting. Unlike my Motorcraft 4300s and 4350s that are much more trouble prone, this is just a great carburetor. So very reliable. The other thing about these engines is that they don't have all that strong of bottom ends. The 400s and the 351Ms did have some issues with the lower ends and losing oil pressure, I would say pretty prematurely. So just keep the oil changed. Later years they would have casting porosity issues on the 400s as well. Keep the oil changed, keep some ZDDP additive in it. That's about the best I can say. But other than kind of sitting low, the reach envelope on this for the controls is pretty good. A lot better than the GMs of the era. You can reach all the controls easily. It's very quiet in here, especially for what's an economy car. This is a very pleasant long trip car with the windows up, no issues at all. Thanks again for watching. Until next time.